When she transformed into a butterfly, the caterpillar spoke not of her beauty, but of her weirdness. When she transformed into the fullness of her potential, they spoke not of her beauty, but of her weirdness. They wanted her to change back into what she had always been, but she had wings. Dean Jackson, but she had wings. Beyonce dropped Lemonade last night, and since we are in the Chain Breaker series, this is our last sermon. I'll offer you this quote: freedom. I break chains all by myself, not gonna allow my freedom to bust and rest in hell. Freedom for me. And now we go to the biblical text. I hope it's a verse you're most familiar with, Acts chapter 16, beginning with verse 16. One day, as we were going to a place of prayer, we met a slave girl who had a spirit of divination and brought her owners a great deal of money through fortune telling. While she followed Paul and us, she would cry out, "These men are slaves to the Most High God, who proclaim to you a way of salvation." While we were going to pray, we met somebody who was enslaved, and this enslaved person had a gift. And the gift was the spirit of knowledge and discernment. And because she had the ability to foresee what was not and to see clearly what was, people made money off her. They pimped this little butterfly. And while she followed us, she would cry out, "These folks are slaves to the Most High God, and they proclaim to you a way of salvation." She would cry out, "I'm not the only slave on the sidewalk. These folk too are slaves, and their message is you can be saved." She kept doing this for many days, decreeing and declaring what she saw on Paul and them. And then Paul gets annoyed. He is annoyed, and he turns and he says to what he identified as a spirit, "I order you in the name of Jesus Christ to come out of her." And it came out of her. And when her owners saw that their hope of making money was gone, they were on their way to prayer, and they met a girl who was gifted, yet she had been enslaved. She told the truth about them, and Paul became annoyed, and he stifled her gift. And my title is To Pimp a Butterfly. This gift ain't free. To pimp a butterfly. This gift ain't free. We know in the biblical text the writers did not customarily view the voices and identities of women as necessary to be explicit about who they were, where they were from. We don't get the appropriate details about women, and so womanist scholars like myself, we like to fill in the gap with a bit more information, and we do this through a sanctified imagination. So I would like for you to jump on the train with me, and we're going to imagine that her name is Jade. I named her Jade because the Jade Stone is the dream stone, and the last I checked, I was in Dream Life Fellowship. And I do believe that Jade has some lessons to teach us, not only about being a chain breaker, but about being one who is gifted, about being one who has gifts that are misunderstood, about being one who was sent here different from the rest. Yet you are enslaved to a system that was not built with you in mind. The Chain Breaker series, we've dealt with all kinds of chains. We started dealing with traumas in families, and then we continue to deal with trauma in relationships, trauma in systems, trauma in government. We dealt with individuals who abuse their power. We dealt with family members who keep their pain in the closet. We dealt with root issues, what truly makes us who we are. And now we are going to deal with Jade. Can't you see her? She was about 5'2", light, fair skin, no haircut. She was real gifted. She loved the color purple. I'm just talking about Jade, y'all. Jade had a gift, and her gift led to her being sought out, because when you went to Jade, Jade was like grandmama, big mama, pushing that bucket in the kitchen full of Clorox water. She would go into prayer, and the Spirit of the Lord would reveal to her some things about you that you didn't want Jade to know. Anybody had a praying big mama? And Jade had this uncanny ability to look at people and read them. Jade had this Paul to be the great church planter. When Jade was in the street making money the best way she could, doing something strange for a little piece of change, Jade thought that she saw redemption in folk who could help her. And so she was walking behind them, all declaring in so many words, my name is Jade, I got a gift, and I need to be set free. My name is Jade, I got a gift, and the system has enslaved me. My name is Jade, and I see you work for the God, maybe you can help me. And day in and day out, Jade used her gift to liberate herself. I'm a chain breaker all by myself, and I refuse to allow my freedom to rest in hell. Chain breakers, how many of you throughout this series can identify places and spaces and people to whom you are enslaved? I've been asking you to consider your journey. I've been asking you to consider yourself. And now, on the last Sunday, I'm asking you, where do you need to free yourself from? Who do you need to cut loose? Like Beyonce said, you're a chain breaker all by yourself. Don't allow your freedom to rest in hell, but be free. Jade, 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 the dream stone Jade, the prophetic utterance Jade. She had a gift, and she went to the church, and the church did not help her. Instead, the church stifled her gift because the church was annoyed by her presence. How many people in the room? You go bedside Baptist, you go pillowcase Pentecostal, you go blanket Baptist, you go sheep Presbyterian, you go pillow holiness, you go TV apathetic. How many people in the room are not attending gatherings of believers because you had a gift, and perhaps your gift was your identity, or perhaps your gift was some other kind of way that God made you, and now the church doesn't understand, so you're like Jane crying out in the streets, I know that you belong to God, and I know that you have the power to help me. Why don't you help me? How many Janes are in the room this morning?
Hallelujah.
That pause wasn't for effect. That pause was for authentic disclosure. How many Jades are in the room this morning? Jade, she was mishandled. She was mishandled by the people who enslaved her, and they enslaved her by demonizing her gift. Let me pause here for a minute. We know that the text was written from a particular perspective of power, and we do understand that if Jade had been quote unquote on the Paul side of things, Jade's gift would not have been labeled a spirit of divination. If Jade had been on the Paul side of things, Jade's identity would not have been demonized. If Jade had been on the Paul side of things, Jade's gift would not have been cast out, but Jade's gift would have been used. But Jade's gift cannot be used. The only response Paul had for Jade's gift was to demonize her, because of Paul's because Paul himself had been miseducated. When we think about Paul in all of the ways, some folks are still in bondage to his consciousness that he never intended to be a sacred text in the first place. It was just supposed to be a letter to some of the people he met on his journey, but it was canonized. It ain't Paul's fault. I don't blame him, but since we have him here, we consider Paul, we have to consider the culture that produced him. And he was produced in a culture where women were property. He was produced in a culture where Christians and Christians were taboo. So why would we expect Paul to embrace Jade when he don't even understand that Jade is God's possibility made manifest in earth? Too many of you are going back to people trying to get them to embrace you, but their consciousness is not even constructed to receive you. They don't even know that you are the image of God walking on this earth. I'm trying to help. I'm trying to get you. You are who God says you are. Do I have a Jade? Do I have a Jade? Do I have a Jade? Do I have a Jade in the room? And every authority resting in humankind has some part of miseducation in it, because every human authority has limited knowledge. Know that. Even those of you who call me pastor, I don't have all power, all knowledge, or all authority. That's what I'm telling you, to know God for yourself. Paul misidentified her because of Paul's own miseducation and insecurities. And though Jane had already been mishandled in the streets to Pimp A Butterfly, this gift ain't free. But what I love about Jade, like our purple highness prince, she sought to free herself. She took the initiative. She saw an opportunity and she seized it through persistence. Let me pause here for a minute. Too many of you with big dreams and little things, too many of you see yourselves as grasshoppers in the land of giants. But I need you to walk in the persistence of Jade, and I need you to go for that which you know you are called and ordained to do. And I need you to do it in spite of the people who hear you but don't acknowledge you. The text is very clear. Jade was walking behind them for days. The text is very clear. Jade showed up. We don't know what time she showed up on the first day, but she showed up on the first day and they ignored her. She showed up on the second day and they ignored her. She showed up on the third day. They ignored her. We don't know how many days Jade was crying out from her gift for freedom to kneel, but it got to the point to where the people who had the power had to respond. And he did. Paul did, I believe, the best he could with what he had and what he knew to do. And Paul looked at Jade and he saw pessimism. He looked at Jade and he saw a nuisance. He looked at Jade and he saw a problem. And Paul's vision was so myopic and microscopic and narrow that he looked at Jade and he just saw Jade. He didn't look at Jade and see the system that was enslaving her. He just looked at her brown female body and deduced that she was the issue. Pause here for a minute. It's just like people saying all lives matter. It's just like people questioning folk simply because they don't understand where they're coming from. It's just like when you go to your parent and you say, this thing has happened to me and this thing is who I am, or this thing is what I desire to do, and they can't see no further than the you that is in front of their face. And I want to say to every chain breaker in the room, be very careful when people come to you. Be sure that you're looking not just at them, but around them and beneath them and above them to see just who or what is holding them captive. If Paul had not been agitated, Paul would not have misappropriated his power. That's the other hymn I want you to get. If Paul had not been agitated, Paul would not have misappropriated his power. And to a greater depth of wholeness. Let me say that again. Paul misappropriated his power simply because he didn't want to do the difficult work of journeying with Jade to new levels and new depths of wholeness. Why do I say this? I say this because, as I said, Jade had a gift. And if Jade had been quote-unquote Christian, Jade's gift would be known as the spirit of knowledge and discernment, the spirit of prophecy. And what Paul should have did, Paul should have freed Jade from those who enslaved her and perverted her gift. Am I making sense?
Yeah.
Do you see? Paul should not have misidentified her and her gift. Paul should have addressed the systems of people who were responsible for imprisoning and enslaving her. Am I making sense? Yeah. It's just like when the president say, Black Lives Matter, can't keep yelling in the street. He's identifying the people and themselves as problematic, but what he's not doing is using his power to address the militarized police to whom we are responding. Do you see what I'm saying? It's just the same way when it came time to free enslaved Africans. People wanted to address the enslaved Africans as though they were the reason why they were in chains. Instead of dealing with those Eurocentric ideas that need to take captive and die. And we talked about that spirit of David.
Yeah.
As I prepare to go to my seat, because I'm sweating out my Dior.
Come on.
Just feel. The saddest thing about Jade remains the most beautiful thing about Prince. Jade took initiative and sought to free herself from those who had her in captivity. And in so doing, in using her gift to free herself, the church responded by adding another layer of bondage. Think about the trauma that happens when you've been functioning in a particular way as one gifted, and now when you go to pray, you can't hear nothing. Think about the kind of internal struggle that happens when you self-identify as a child of God, but the church tells you that you can't be a child of God because God don't look like you. What about the traumatic experience of going back to a community of people who knew her to be a seer, and before prophets were known as prophets in the Old Testament, they were known as seers. So she's going back to the people who know her as a seer, and they're asking her, Jade, what do you see for the community? And Jade is like, I don't see anything. People are coming to her desiring to be made whole, and Jade is saying, I can't hear anything. How many Jades in the room have been so separated from the Spirit of God within you that you have not been able to see or hear or think clearly? Your mind has been run shut with chaos and conflict and trauma and chaos and conflict and trauma because an external force told you that who you were was outside the image of God. But we thank God for Prince Rogers Nelson, who came on the scene in the late 70s, first time on TV, dressed like Tarzan, with a blowout that I envy to this day. He came on the scene, singing in that falsetto. He came on the scene, making us think about the sacred and the sexual at the same time. He came on the scene unapologetically black, and even in his 1993 interview with tend to have small bits of character and maturity.
Amen.
Because all the caterpillar is intended to do is eat. A caterpillar isn't intended to go and help in pollination. No, the function of the caterpillar is just to consume. Think about that as you engage people. Who is in your life just to consume some part of who you are? Who is in your life just to consume some dynamic of how God made you? Who up in here, or just up in here to consume some good preaching on Sunday?
Yeah.
We got caterpillars!
All right now. Yeah.
And our ritual for this morning, I got 1 good minute. You have a black butterfly. And I have some permanent chalk markers. And I want you to write the one thing that you have sought to separate yourself from. The one gift, the one ability, the one identity that you frown upon about yourself, because at some point in your life, somebody told you it was not of God. Somebody told you you were not enough. Somebody told you you were not capable. Somebody told you you were not worthy. Write that one thing. Write that one thing on your black butterfly. That summer, raw sugar, the caterpillar complex. You all right on that one. He hated standing out, hated being different. He was a butterfly living among caterpillars. He say, come on y'all, fly with me. They say, where we going? We caterpillars. The ground is all we know. He stretches out his wings, beholds his own beauty. They say, you think you better than everybody, flaunting all your colors, knocking stuff over, talking about all the things you seen while you up there flying. You ain't nothing but a dressed up worm. You ain't even a caterpillar like us. Their voices follow him. He can hear them no matter how high or fast he flies. The wind is never loud enough to drown them out. You ain't nothing but a dressed up worm. You ain't even a caterpillar like us. So he pulls and pulls. He won't give up until it's done. Pulling doesn't work, so he gets the scissors. He slashes big holes. He can reach his hand and he pulls and pulls, tearing, ripping, clipping all the loose ends away, satisfied. He looks at his reflection in the mirror, turning back the hands of time. He smiles. He used to be a butterfly. Now he's a caterpillar again. He sweeps up the scrapes of the wings from the floor and throws them away. God, we come before you thanking you for this word about Jade. Thanking you, oh God, for helping us to see more clearly those times and spaces in our lives when we've been mishandled and misidentified through miseducation and someone else's ill-informed perspective. We also come before you thanking you, God, for showing us those times where we have mishandled people, where we have misidentified people, where we have not had the appropriate perspective, and where we have abused our power. We ask for your forgiveness now, God, and we go forth in the power of the butterfly. We go forth now, God, knowing that there is an aspect of us that has developed wings simply because we pressed our way at 8 a.m. There is an aspect of us that's ready to take flight. There are some writers who are going to start writing, oh God. There are some teachers who are going to start teaching. There are some entrepreneurs who are going to start building businesses. There are some seers who are going to start prophesying. There are some healers who are going to start healing. There are some mothers who are going to start mothering. Be with us as we soar into the freedom that is ours to realize,
Yes,
to
Lord.
cultivate, and to live in.
Yes, Lord.
Freedom, freedom, freedom for me. Freedom, freedom, freedom for me. Before I be a slave, I'll lay down in my grave and go home to the Lord.